I think that in the early part of life, we learn how to set goals for ourselves, to go through with a plan, that's going to come to fruition later. We learn how to have relationships that grow deeper with other people. I think that people learn that early on. And I didn't.
All right. Kate.
Hi.
Kate, where'd you grow up? Where are you from originally?
Hawaii. I grew up on Oahu.
Oh, wow.
Until I was about 12, and then there was a lot of moving around on the mainland after that.
Tell me about your family.
I was with my mom and stepdad mostly. My mom and dad divorced when I was real young. I don't really have any memories of them together. They split up at that point. So I mostly grew up with my mom and stepdad, Brad, in Hawaii, and would visit my dad sometimes. He moved to Seattle when I was little, maybe 5 years old. So I had a lot of time in Seattle off and on as well.
How would you describe your childhood?
In some ways it was maybe just like a very slightly upper middle class kind of upbringing there in Hawaii. My stepdad was in the gold and jewelry business there. My mom didn't really work. But behind the kind of normalish childhood, there was some really abnormal stuff going on. Mainly my mom and stepdad, they believed that the end of the world was very near, and that we were part of the elect, the chosen, and that, basically we were going to go to this place when the tribulation came, and the
tribulation,
the great tribulation, 7 years of bad stuff for everyone else, but not us. Oh God. Okay.
You were how old when this was going on?
My very first memories are of these conversations about like the book of Revelation and the major prophets like Isaiah, Ezekiel, Jeremiah. So it was going on my entire life, but the end had come in 1992 when I was 11. And so the bulk of the story, I guess, that I'm here for today happened in 1992.
And you were how old?
11.
11. Did you have any hunch that what they were talking about was not accurate?
I think there was always this kind of deep little kernel somewhere in me that thought maybe this wasn't true. I don't know if I really thought it wasn't true or if I just really hoped that it wasn't true.
Hindsight has a way of blurring.
Yeah, hindsight does have a way of blurring it. The way I remember the time leading up to leaving was just really a lot of conflict and contradiction in me. 1 minute I was like kind of all into the fantasy, and then, something would happen, like I had to say goodbye to my dad, for instance, before leaving, and I wasn't able to tell him about all of this. And I remember having a sharp pang of, okay, this is wrong. But I was so brainwashed, My mom, let's see, I never know where to start this story because it's hard for me. So I'll kind of start in the middle, and then I guess we'll probably end up having to go back in time a little bit.
It probably starts with her great-grandmother.
The dysfunction was already a couple of generations deep, I think. But, basically my mom went through some real traumatic emotional injury in her early adulthood. I have 4 siblings that are all somewhat old, significantly older than me. And she didn't have any of them when she got a one-way ticket to Hawaii in 1976. And there's a big story there that I think factors into why a person could get to the place where They literally want the entire world to burn, But she and Brad together kind of cooked up this theory that somehow they were part of the elect. To those of those watching later that grew up in some craziness like this, there's supposed to be 144,000 people that are the chosen. They're like the nation of Israel in the end times, right?
Was there a cult that they were involved in?
No. That's the thing. Like, we were not a cult. Like, I think a cult, you got to have a few things going on. Like, you have to want followers. Like, you have to actually want like other people involved. Someone has to know how to be a financial administrator. You kind of have to condone sex with children at some point, I think, to like have a real cult. So we didn't have any of that going on. But the heart of it, the seed of it was there, We told others. I have one of my older brothers, John. He's actually like still to this day really into this whole story, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But
into it in terms of believing it.
Like there's some part of him that believes there's some big meaningful truth to all of this.
The tribulation just got delayed a few decades.
Yeah, it happens. Historically. So anyway, they cooked up this whole theory that the end was coming. It was coming pretty soon. And I grew up thinking that I would never reach like adulthood, before I never had any dreams for myself. I never saw the future as this expansive thing. There was a wall there. I wonder if other people that grew up in like weird shit like me have that, where they don't know what to do with themselves or who they can be later on. Anyway.
Because your future wasn't.
There was no future. Why would I have? I remember when all my little kid friends, I want to be a veterinarian. I'm going to be a movie star. I want to be a fireman. You know what I mean? I just didn't have any of that. Playing house with the other kids, someone's the mom, someone's the dad, and everyone else is like the other family members. I would never want to be the mom or the dad ever, ever, ever. I never wanted to, I just sensed and felt early on that, loving anyone too much or having too much of a relationship with anyone was a bad move, because I was just going to have to leave them to die horribly in the tribulation anyway. So that was really damaging. It's still damaging. It still damages me. I'm doing better with it though. Anyhow.
Are there remnants from that in your adult life?
Oh my God, yeah.
Where you don't believe that everyone, consciously of course, that there is no tribulation, but is there a part of you that's maybe subconsciously believes that everyone else is going to die and you're going to survive? No,
that I don't have. That left me, that feeling of dread left me pretty early on. But I think that in the early part of life, we learn how to set goals for ourselves, to go through with a plan, that's going to come to fruition later. We learn how to have relationships that grow deeper with other people. I think that people learn that early on. And I didn't. And so, like I said, I've gotten better, but my teen years and 20s were pretty lost in those regards. It took me a while to kind of relearn those things.
Were there other families that were part of your group?
Nope. Once again, I think to have a real cult, you've got to actually want to recruit followers. And that was never what it was about for my mom. But they decided that, I won't get into all of the weird giant deep rabbit hole of why they decided all of this. But they determined that this place of safety spoken of in Revelation 12, this place that the elect are supposed to go, that when all the shit falls apart in the world, my mom was above all of the other obsessions she had with all of this weird religious shit, that was like the consuming obsession, is to find the physical, actual place of safety. And she determined that it was a place called Aldabra Island, which is part of the Seychelles Islands in the Indian Ocean. And it's, to this day, almost completely uninhabited. It's like a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's very protected, you know? And so getting there is an incredible ordeal. It certainly was in 1992 with, you know, prior to the internet and all these things we have now for travel. So about a year ahead of time, we started planning for this. And we were not able to, like, there was no tourism of any sort at that time on Aldabra, no ecotourism, anything. There's a little bit of that now because I've looked it up. But we were able to basically get ourselves to Mahe. Mahe is the main island of the Seychelles. We were able to get ourselves there, and from there, we had to figure it out. I mean, it was up to God, you know? And so we had to sell everything that we owned. We had a little townhome in Kaneohe. I mean, we sold everything. I remember we had about 3 weeks of this massive moving sale, and I remember my mom handed me this little package of like multicolored stickers, and I was supposed to price all of my things, my clothes, my stuffed animals, my everything that I had. And I remember when I was doing that and I was starting to watch everything leave our house, people buying it, you know, that I had one of those really sharp pangs that maybe we weren't doing the right thing here. And so I remember overpricing all of my things to what I thought was like a exorbitant price. But that didn't slow it down any at all. So we went to Texas first. When we left Hawaii, we went to Texas first because my mom's whole family is in Texas. And she has she had two sisters. She was in the middle. Her younger sister, Janice, she was closer with in those days. And I remember overhearing a conversation where Janice was like pleading with her to just leave me there with her and promising that she would send me to the Seychelles if I needed to go and stuff. But she, you know, Janice knew that this was not okay. And that didn't work. We left. We stopped in London for a few days. We had all these big Foot Lockers full of all this shit we thought we'd need. I don't know how we managed to move it all, but we did. And so we take the 11, 12-hour flight down to the Seychelles, to Mahe. And we get there, and it's kind of like, all right, well, how are we going to get to Aldabra? So it took us maybe a week and a half. And during that time, we met with a man named William Andre. He was the manager, the head of the Seychelles Island Foundation, which manages places like the Valley de Mai and Aldabra and everything. And his first thing is he was like, yeah, you can't bring that kid down there. Like, you don't understand. It's not safe. It's, you know, it's 1,000 miles across the ocean. You know, what exactly are you people doing? What exactly? And so, you know, my mom, I think she might have just put it as biblical research or something like that. You know, I can't remember exactly what she said, but he was kind of like, yeah, there's no boats going to Aldabra. And there weren't. Like, there was no regular, you know, they had a boat might go drop some workers off there for a year-long contract. And I mean, it was dicey, you know, there was no path there at that time. And so Brad sensed that Andre had maybe a bit of, you know, he could He could be bribed. So we bribed him. We bribed this government official. I think might have been $5,000, which was a fuck ton of money to someone in the Seychelles at that time. And so I think he said, this is a contribution, if I recall correctly. I was sitting there for that meeting. I was sitting right there in the room. And, we get a phone call at the hotel that we were at later that day. And it's Andre on the phone. He's like, it's a miracle. There's a boat. It's going to Aldabra. Oh my God, it's a miracle. God wants us to go. God. And by this point, like the whole time on Mahe, I was like, I want to go home. I want to go home. By this time, I was wholly wanting to go home. And I didn't care if we died in the tribulation. It didn't matter to me. I didn't want to do this. And so we show up the next morning, and there's like a main marina there in Mahe where the boats are and stuff. We show up and we meet. We had also been in communication with at that time there was an embassy there, a U.S. embassy there. We'd been in communication with someone there. I don't know if he was the actual ambassador or not, named Kevin Easton. And he was like, whoa, what are you Americans doing? Whoa, what's going on? And so we show up down there, and William Andre's there, and so is Kevin Easton. And Kevin pretty much demanded that we give him our passports before we left. And I remember my mom and Brad being like against it. And he was like going to make a big stink if we didn't. So we gave him our passports, which is probably one of the reasons we're still alive. And there was this big boat, like a Coast Guard boat. It had big guns on it and everything. It was called the Andromach. And so we go over to it and we meet the captain, who was a very jovial man. And he said, all right, usually it takes 4 days to get to Aldabra, but we're going to make it there in 2. And he meant it. We absolutely hauled ass. It was an incredibly rough ride. I was sick as a dog the entire time. I've never thrown up that much in my life. We got there to Aldabra, and he calls us up on deck, and I remember walking up this spiral metal staircase, and it was just like the reek of the fuel and whatever else. And I just remember being so sick, and he opens the door, and it was like boom, like just the brightest light. I hadn't been up to deck since we left, and we're standing out there, and he's like, there it is. And we don't see anything. But there's this bank of clouds, and they were like green. We had read about this, that was a thing with Aldabra, because it's an atoll, and it's this huge lagoon, and I guess it makes the clouds look green sometimes. And so we stood there, and I felt like I was at the end of the world, And so we get off the boat, and I guess I should back up. A small boat comes out there to meet us, and there's 3 guys on it. And one of them gets off, and I immediately, you could tell this guy's the boss. And he's maybe 6 feet tall, clearly mixed race. And he had this machete that just hung down to his knee. It was huge. And he introduced himself as the island manager, and he said his name was Tony Morell. I doubt that was his name. And I was immediately afraid of him. I just knew there was something off about this guy. And it took a few trips to get all our stuff and everything. Anyway, we end up going on shore. And I was still really sick. And that first night, We all sit down. Including us, there were 17 people on this island, just to give some context here. And they were all workers. Like there was a couple of meteorologists. There was the mechanic named George. There was a woman that was there that did everybody's housekeeping and stuff. So there was just people there working on contract. And so we sit down in the mess hall where everyone would meet for meals. And there were a couple of tables in there, kind of like long picnic style tables, a number of them. And Tony told us to come. He sat at the head of one of those tables, and he had I don't know if it was his wife, but a woman, and they had a really young child, maybe a year and a half old, if I'd guess. And he told us to come sit down there because that was the Whites table. And my mom was like, well, we wanted to talk to everybody here, and it created some tension between her and Tony pretty much immediately. And I don't remember if we did sit down there with him or not, but we got through dinner, and I continued to be really sick, and I was just adamant that I wanted to leave. And the Andromache was still sitting out there. So either that night or the next morning, my mom went and talked to Tony and was like, okay, maybe we should leave, and he was like, well, the Andromache will be here for another couple of days. So, I'll radio out. There was one radio on the island, and it had been left there during World War II, and it had a crank style. Like, this was it. This was the only communication with anyone. And so he was like, yeah, sure, we'll go ahead and, I'll radio them in the morning, and we'll let them know that you want to go back. So they set us up in this little hut that was kind of down the beach. I think it had been built in the late 70s by like a British science team that was there long term. So they put us up in there. And so the next morning, I look out the window, and the Andromache is gone. It's gone. He totally fucking lied to us. And I think that even at that point that the wheels were turning for Tony. I think he was trying to figure out a way to capitalize on our presence there. And so my mom was pretty furious, and so he assured us that that the Andromache had gone on to Madagascar for whatever it was they were doing, and that, he would talk with them and they could come back in like 8 to 10 days. Yeah, we never saw the Andromache again. So I'm having to accept that we're there. I had the worst dreams when I would sleep every night about like horrible war and everything that might be going on back on the back in Hawaii or on the mainland here. And I had dreams about going home. It was terrible. And so it's maybe like a week and a half in, and we'd started forming some really wonderful relationships with some of the workers there. They were amazing human beings, and so we'd started to form these, especially with George, the mechanic of the island, and then with Hugh, one of the two meteorologists that was stationed there. They had a meteorology station there that was kind of a thing, and they were both young in their late 20s. And I guess I kind of forgot to mention it that very first night, that very first dinner, that Tony he asked a couple of questions. Like, there were like some sights to see around the island, right? And he was like, I remember there's this pond where these jellyfish are, and they swim upside down. It's crazy. Anyway, he was like, would you like to go to the upside down jellyfish pond? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, well, I'll take you tomorrow. And he was like I mean, he was trying to separate me from my parents immediately in any way that he could. For exactly what end, I don't know. I have theories. And I remember being immediately uncomfortable with that and like turning to my mom and being like, yeah, let's go, Mom, you know. Anyway, we ended up going to that place like a couple days later, and Tony didn't come along. Okay, but I digress. So there was an old man that lived there, and he didn't have a job. His name was Bernard, and he had been on Aldabra for like 40 years, and everyone just kind of let him be there. And he was not sure how old he was, but it was his birthday. And so, you know, the workers wanted to do something for his birthday. By the way, all of these people were like complete alcoholics, and if there was any alcohol on the island whatsoever, they would get to it. And some alcohol came with us on that boat, and they knew it. And it was under lock and key. They also brewed their own booze that they called jungle juice, which I never had any of because I was a kid. But they were like wanting to do something for Bernard for his birthday, and I think it was mostly an excuse to have a party. And so Frank, the cook there, the chef, he was wonderful. He was having my mom and I help him make a cake for Bernard. And Tony came through and was like, didn't want this party to happen, basically. I can't remember what reason he cited why we can't have this party, you know. And my mom was like, well, I say we can. I mean, what the fuck does she think she's doing? And so she really stepped to him on that and undermined his authority at that time. And so later that night, we have this party. And whatever the booze supplies they had wasn't very much, and they'd run out. And so Tony showed up, or we went down the beach to his place. I don't remember which it was. It was pitch black dark. And my mom was drunk at this time, and she demanded that Tony open up the shop, which was just where, you know, supplies were, and like release a certain amount of beer or vodka or whatever it was on our tab, because people had like a tab. And Tony kept track of that tab. And we'd been made aware also that Tony like cheated the workers and put things that he used on other people's tabs, and they knew about it, but they couldn't really do anything about it, right? And so it was like this. So she not only undermined his authority for a second time, but she also, in the course of this, let it be known that, like, I know you're stealing from them. And so this was really more than Tony could bear. But the party did go on. I remember he gave them something else. I don't remember what it was. Maybe it was beer, maybe it was vodka. I don't know. And the party went on. And so the next day, we were all down at the mess hall, and Hugh and George came, and we're like, okay, so you've really fucking pissed Tony off. Like, this is, you can't go back from this. And he was threatening to kill us, like fucking kill us over this. And not only that, he got specific in his threats and was going to rape my mom and me first, and kill Brad first, and then my mom, and then do whatever he wanted with me. I mean, he got specific about it. And they let us know that a year prior, there was a scientist there, a woman, that he had raped while she was there, and that his threats were real. And there was from some time before that, I don't know when exactly, there was a worker there that got real sideways with Tony, and he ended up dead. And everyone pretty much knew Tony did it, but no one could prove anything. So this was a credible threat. And here we are in the middle of the fucking Indian Ocean with no way to get out of here. And then it was at that time that we pretty much we were pretty much in that little hut more or less for the next like 7 weeks. Tony, would have reasons to leave and go to some other part of the island pretty frequently. So he would be gone for many hours, maybe even an overnight at times. And the workers knew what the deal was. And so they would kind of come like, I guess, let us out, basically. We'd be able to move freely while he was elsewhere. And I know that George and Hugh, Jean-Claude as well, he was the other meteorologist. I know that the three of them frequently posted up like right outside our hut at night and watched for us. And so things went on like that for a while. And we were obviously forbidden from access to the radio room to get out of there. And it started to become a big question of like, what's the plan here? Like, what is he, why hasn't he killed us yet? Why hasn't he called William Andre himself and said, get these crazy ass Americans out of here? Like, what is the deal? And so I'll never know what his plans were exactly, but as an adult that knows about the world now, I think he was trying to figure out how to probably traffic us back to mainland Africa. He was from Mozambique, and it was at the very height, almost the end of the Mozambican Civil War at that time. And he was, a lot of those managers of those outlying islands, as I later learned at that time, were very bad men that were trying to avoid their whereabouts being known from wherever they were from for whatever they had done. And I have no doubt in my mind that Tony Morell was one of these people. And so, like I said, things went on like this for a while. Sometimes we would be able to go down to the mess hall and eat a meal, like always escorted by at least a couple of the workers. Sometimes it would get brought to us. And then one night, we were laying there in the pitch dark because it's the darkest place you can imagine. And outside our little windows, we start hearing this like whoosh, whoosh sounds all around the hut. And it was Tony out there cutting down all of the branches of the palm trees that were around. And this was like the only shade for the hut. And so it got really, really hot in there after that. And then there was a time when George or Hugh, I can't remember, came down and told us like Tony's doing something with like the water pipe situation. The water was a very simple system there. And told us to fill up all the containers that we had with water because he was going to cut our water off. He cut a path. So the hut was right on the beach, and there was a path along that. I mean, it's the beach, the water's right there. But behind, there was a lot of pretty dense foliage, and he had cut a path from like where his place was around up to the back of our hut. So he had access to us always. There was a night or an afternoon, I guess, when a bunch of the workers like walked us down to Bernard's place, which was way down the other side of the beach. And we came back, and Tony had clearly been in our place. He had rifled through all of our things. I don't know what he was looking for. Financial documents, passports, who knows? Anything he could find out about us. And, this whole time, like my mom's just kind of, she inflamed the situation consistently. She could not control her anger and her ego about all this. And, I'm not saying it was a good situation to get us into in the first place. It's just that, I wouldn't have handled it that way. So maybe week 3 or so, I'm supposed to be asleep in the other little room of the hut, but I wasn't because I didn't sleep while we were there, like really at all. And her and Brad, my stepdad, who was more or less really cowardly through all of this whole situation, they were having a conversation about what to do. Do we get someone to break into the fucking radio room for us? What do we do? And, and do we kill him? That came up. And if we kill him, how do we do it? And my mom had a heart problem. And because we were leaving indefinitely, her doctor prescribed several different heart medications that she would have a large supply of, right, for however long we were gone. And so one of these was a kind of medication that like really slows down the heart and really drops one's blood pressure. I don't remember the name of it. And so at this time, they discussed that probably the best thing to do would be to somehow get this into his food, or get him, to ingest this somehow. And then they decided after another however long of speaking that they didn't think that it was right to kill him unless it was an outright fight, right? Like they weren't going to go and plot the death of this person. I'm laying there going, I think we should kill Tony. I think we should plot the death of this person. And so the next day or so, I went and I got a handful, maybe a dozen of these pills. And I wrapped him up in this little sarong that one of my Barbies had. And I wrapped it up in a little pouch and I kept it with me all the time. And I tried to think of, could I get Frank, the cook, to do this for me? And then I found out that he was actually related to Tony by marriage somehow or something like that. Anyway, Frank wasn't going to kill him for me. And I had that realization. And then I just couldn't think of a way to get all of this medication into his food unless he had actually taken me, maybe if all this shit did happen and he did come and kill my mom and Brad and take me, then at least I would be in his house. And then as time went on, I realized, that may or may not happen. And to be honest, I kept those for myself. Because after 5 weeks or so, and just feeling like we were never going to get out of there, and the whole world was burning outside too, and no one was going to come. It was the most hopeless thing, most hopeless situation for me. So time went on, and my mom finally just kind of got fed up one day, and she went, because Tony had the only key to this room where the radio was, and he was not going to let us reach the outside world. So we wrote out a message, and there was only a couple of times a day you could call out without a bunch of static being there, and the workers let us know all this, right? So we prepared this letter to William Andre, and under it, I remember we had a little book. I don't remember what it was, but it had the Morse code in it. And so I remember putting everything in Morse code on the line underneath each line. And so my mom went over to Tony's place, which was kind of away from us. And I remember I went with her, God knows why. And he had 3 guns in his house. He had the only guns on the island, by the way. And so she goes and marches up near his house and starts throwing rocks at the house. And he comes out and she's like, let us into the radio room. No. let us into the fucking radio room. And I remember she's screaming at him, and I remember she called him a sorry sack of rat shit excuse for a human. I'll never forget that. And as we're throwing rocks, this little kid comes out. And I remember, what a fucking coward. He picks up his 1.5-year-old kid and just holds this son, I think it was his son, in front of him. And I remember just being like, I can't believe this, but then I'm standing right there next to my mom. You know what I mean? Like, it was a moment. Anyway, he goes back in the house and he takes this key and he throws it at us. And we march off to the radio room, and George came in there and helped us turn it on, and we radio the SIF office, and we actually get William Andre. And between speaking and using Morse code, we get this message across to him, what's going on there. And his response is basically like, wow, it seems like you're not enjoying your stay on Aldabra. I mean, but what's he going to do? Why are we even there in the first place? We'd bribed this guy. So it's not really in his best interest to bring us back. I mean, I think we presented him with a conundrum for himself. But at the end of that radio call, things were looking even more bleak. And it got more scary, and we were confined to the little hut even more because we'd reached out, and anyone can hear a radio broadcast. It's not like a phone. So who knows who heard what. So some time goes on. I'll try to wrap this up. But we convinced the workers to, after that, the radio room was absolutely shut to us. So George found in his own possessions. So George had a Seychellois mother and supposedly an American soldier. His mother was a prostitute, and supposedly an American soldier fathered him. He'd never met his father. But sometime after that first radio call, he was going through his things, and he had a picture of his mother, and on the back of it, he had written down the radio call number to Kevin Easton, the ambassador that had our passports. And because he had at some point tried to find who his father was. So he had this. And no one had phones in the Seychelles back then, but everyone had radios. And so he was like, I have this, right? So we convinced a couple of the workers to basically break the door to the radio room down one day when Tony had to go on a really long trip. He was going to be gone overnight. So we planned it for Tony takes off, he rides off into the sunrise, and we break the door to the radio room down, and we reach Kevin Easton, and we explain what has happened, and ended up releasing our funds to him that we had in a bank there, and he chartered the first boat that he could to come and get us. And it took 6 days, and this boat shows up, and it was these two French guys on this beautiful sailing boat. And they picked us up, and we got out of there. George came back to Mahe with us. He blamed it on a medical situation he had going on, which was genuine, but really I think he could not stay on that island because he had put himself in a very dangerous position with Tony to be left there after that. So I'll kind of skip ahead to, we leave Mahe, we leave George. I've never heard what happened to any of these people ever, by the way. I have wondered so many times in my life what happened to them after they helped us the way they did. What happened to Tony. So we leave Mahe, and I have zero recollection. I remember going to the airport and everything, but I have no recollection from the time that plane took off until we got into LAX. And it happened to be Thanksgiving Day when we got to LAX, and we stayed in a hotel there, and we didn't, things went, I've hardly mentioned Brad in this story, but Brad pretty much buried his head into Louis L'Amour books the entire time. And he didn't stick up for us, I'll tell you that. But I think, my mom was considering just going back to Texas where her family was, but we ended up going back to Hawaii for about a year. And then we ended up moving to the mainland after that. And she and Brad split up at that time, and life got pretty dicey. But that is a very short version of this story. I think more important than going there and coming back and all of that, I think to me, the more important thing is the psychology of my mom. So way before I came along, she married her high school sweetheart right out of high school. They had 3 kids in very quick succession. And according to her, although my siblings and her first husband, Paul, vehemently deny it, she caught her husband having sex with her sister, her older sister, Rebecca. And apparently he slept around with some other people that were close to my mom, and it was really traumatizing to her. She wanted to leave him. She told her parents about it. Their attitude was, you have to make this marriage work. I mean, these are like small town Texas law enforcement people, right? Back in the 60s and 70s. You don't get divorced no matter what. And so eventually she did divorce Paul, and she remarried a man named Johnny. And they had another son named Chad, my half-brother. And Johnny was a fucking monster. He was physically very abusive. I know to my brother John and to my mom, he was sexually abusive to my mom, and he was sexually abusive to my oldest sister. My mom had to get out of that situation. It was a fucking nightmare. And in the process of all that, Paul and his family had a lot more resource than my mom did. And he took the kids, and the 3 kids, Amy, John, and Becky, he took them. And I think based on what they've delivered to me, I think probably told them a pretty one-sided story throughout their life about what happened with all that made him look real good, and my mom looked like shit. And, maybe that's partly deserved. It probably is, but whatever. And then Johnny took Chad, and no one ever heard from Chad again until about 20 years ago when we looked him up. And so that's the situation that my mom was leaving to go to Hawaii. She, as she puts it, needed to put an ocean between her and all of this. And I think that the fact that she could have no validation or retribution, she had nowhere to put all of this pain and anger. And I think it's like a fucking splinter that got in her, and it just festered for years. It's still festering to this day. And I think that, a few years later, so I should have started with this, but a few years after she got to Hawaii, she had this dream that scared the ever-living hell out of her. And when she woke up from the dream, she pretty much woke up and went and got a Bible. And that's really what started all of this. And the dream was that she was sitting in this kind of rundown little place with like a thatched roof, and it was warm, and the thatched roof was kind of broken up, and there was she could see the clouds and wind going by, and there was a window on each side that didn't have anything in it. It was just a bare window. And that she looked to her left because this huge dove landed on the windowsill. And she asked the dove, she says, "Who are you?" And the dove says, I'm the spirit of Mary Magdalene. And she goes, what do you want? And the dove says, I've come to you as a sign and to comfort you for the loss of your children. And it flew away. And it doesn't sound very scary to maybe to you or me, but something about it scared her to death. And she wanted to know who this Mary Magdalene was. It prompted her to go get a Bible. And this is around the time that she met Brad. She and Brad knew each other before she met my dad, and they were friends. Then they lost touch and all this stuff. And so this dream is what got her into this book. And I think that the prophets in the Bible, I think they offer a lot of validation for the suffering that people have. Because one of the main themes throughout it is that, the chosen, the elect, they go through their tribulation early in their lives. They go through that first. And part of that suffering that God does to you, you know what I mean? Like God puts you through this to see if you're made of the tough stuff, right? If you pass muster and you end up being chosen, and you end up being part of this elect of Christ, then you don't have to go through the tribulation that the rest of the world goes through. And I think that appealed to a really, really deep part of my mom that needed revenge on her first two husbands, revenge on her parents for not helping her through all of this horrible abuse that she endured. And I think that's what all of this was born from. And that informed the kind of love that she had for me. It was a very selfish love. When she and my dad split up, there was no way that he was going to get any custody of me or anything like that. She fought a huge battle with him, and he finally was just like, I'm not going to win this thing. And he gave up, and I understand. I wish it had gone different, but I understand. But my mom, so, think about how to say this. I always grew up thinking that my mom loved me more than anything, loved me more than all of her other kids. She even said fucked up shit like that. She also put it in my head. She would say to me, your dad loves you as much as he can love anyone, but your dad doesn't know how to love. He's not capable of loving people. So love was this very possessive thing. And she made sure, I think, that I didn't love anyone else too much. And that if someone showed me love, that I would question it, if it was love or not. And it just, I started watching your channel years ago. And at one point I was like, why do these stories resonate so deeply with me? Because I grew up with someone that loved me more than anything. And it hit me a few years ago that I didn't have much love. It's something, but it's not love, and it's destructive. And it, when she brought me into this whole world of hers, and then like my siblings and stuff, even though they were quite a bit older and everything, I think they were always really jealous of me because I got to grow up with mom. But man, they dodged a lot of bullets being taken by their dad. I got hit a lot. So, when all this was over with Aldabra, and I was obviously like not the same child that had left, nobody ever asked me. No one in my family ever asked me, hey, Kate, what happened on that island? Hey, you seem like a different person. Are you okay? Because they didn't give a shit. My sister Becky maybe gave a little bit of a shit, a little bit more than the others, and that made me feel like nothing happened on that island. It was like it took me years to kind of confront the fact that that this was a really damaging thing because of the way I was treated, because of people either not wanting to deal with the anger and craziness of my mom. So don't ask a question you don't want an answer to, because then you might be responsible to do something about it, right? And so, so I grew up in a really warped version of love that wasn't really that at all. And love was kept from me because I think my mom felt that if I had too much love from anyone else or I gave too much, that it was a threat to her because of what had happened with her other kids. There's a whole lot more to the story, but I guess that's about it.
It's funny how family dysfunction takes so many different forms.
Oh my God, yeah.
So many.
Like,
they don't even look the same, but they stem from the same.
But they stem from this same thing, you know? And yeah, I mean, I'm 44, and some of this stuff I didn't start to examine until, I mean, some of it I started coming around, 20 some odd years ago to go, okay, well, there's something off here in my life. And it's not everyone else. I mean, clearly this is me. A lot of situations that I would find myself in. But I mean, really only in the last 5 years or so, some of this shit, if I really started to kind of break down and realize my mom's still alive, but she was diagnosed with lung cancer about 3.5 years ago. And it was a real sudden diagnosis, and it was a really severe case. And the doctors were, giving her maybe 15% chance of survival through all of this treatment and everything, which was oh my God, it was a nightmare, right? I mean, cancer treatments are fucking horrible. And so when she was diagnosed and it was looking really bad, I was like, all right, well, I guess I can finally tell my story, because even though I know all the shit my mom's done to me over the years is so bad. It's so bad, Mark. It's just inexcusable emotionally what she's done to me. I'm not even telling you a portion of it, but
you give us a taste of what you're
I'm giving you a taste. Yeah. And this is probably the craziest of the stories, but it's not even the only, we're close to the only one. But I figured I could finally tell my story once she's gone, because there's no way for me to tell this story without making her look really bad. And I didn't want to do that to her, no matter what she'd done to me. Because she raised me to be her constant external validator and her little simp, basically, And I'm okay. But yeah, she didn't die. It's been 3.5 years. And it's once I thought she was going to pass, I was I have to tell this story. And then it's I've been it's having a bit in, you know what I mean? And I'm constantly pulled back, But I saw Jay a few weeks ago, and I know her, I've known her for years.
Who I interviewed a month ago.
Yeah. I saw her interview, and I was I hadn't talked to her in about a year or so, but we've been friends for ages. And I was really shocked to see her face in your lighting setup and everything. And I was oh my God, what's this? And I listened to her whole story, and it was that night I sat my partner Rick down, and I was I want to tell you all about this, because I'm about to tell everybody all about this, because I can't. It's the dam has just busted, and I can't hold it back anymore. So thank you. And thank you, Jay. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you for sharing your story. Your adult life, are there lots of repercussions from what you went through? Yeah, I would say so. This whole not being able to have any dreams for myself or any direction, that's been rough. So my dad, when I was maybe 10 or 11, he opened a nightclub in Seattle that went on for 20 years. It was called the Phoenix Underground. Amazing place.
So I kind of, my teenage years and stuff, like I grew up kind of in that. I started spending a lot of time with my dad when I was like 13, 14 and on. And so I figured, I'll be, that's what I'm going to do for a living. I'm going to work for my dad. I'm going to learn all these things. And someday I'll have a club of my own. And that's what I'm going to do, because it was like, it was safe, like it was really my dad's dream and my dad's thing. Cause all I ever did was follow my mom's dream. You know what I mean? Like, so it was kind of like a little step away from that. But then the Phoenix tanked in a terribly sad and public way in like 2007 or so. And I had a number of women that I'd known over the years that worked, I was in Seattle at the time, that worked at a place that's now long gone called The Lusty Lady. It was a peep show. I don't know, like the old peep show, like you put the quarters in the slot and the window goes up and there's naked ladies on the other side. And so I was still bartending and serving and stuff like that because I had a lot of connections around Seattle. But like I said, it was a really painful, like public closing of the Phoenix. I won't go into all that. And I kind of wanted to get away a little bit. And the Lusty was like a dark cave where like, no, it's just totally anonymous, And I found that I was a really good dancer. And I was really good at making money in that environment. And so I thought, well, I'll do this for a couple years. But then, internet porn killed the peep show stars. So it closed in 2010. And I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, oh, yeah, this thing's about to be done. So I moved down to Portland. And that was like next month will be 16 years that I moved down to Portland. And I have been a dancer the entire time. I am still a stripper. I am a 44-year-old stripper. Not because it's so bad, not because I'm not good at it, but because every time I start to do something else or start to pursue something else, that wall just comes down again. It's so, like, I don't know. I got to figure it out because I can't do this much longer.
Which stops you from
pursuing something else, from feeling like I'm capable of doing anything else other than being like in the service industry or dancing.
Or feeling worthy?
Feeling worthy. Yeah, feeling worthy. Fucking A. Like, yeah, feeling worthy, feeling capable. A little bit different. But yeah,
Yep.
Worthy and capable both, but definitely feeling capable. I just feel there's like still some part of me that feels like if I was taken in by all of this insanity, even though I know I was like a little kid and I was completely brainwashed, like there's a part of me that just feels so gullible and stupid and like a fool. Like a fool. I feel like a fool a lot for that. And like I paid all this money to take all these courses in investigative genetic genealogy because I was like, that's fucking cool. I'm going to do that. And I got a little ways into it and I just gave up.
You're not a fool. You were a little kid that was...
I know. And I know. It's like I know, but there's just, yeah, like you were asking about the lasting effects. I would say the worst effect is it just wrecked my ability to have any kind of dream or anything for myself or to follow through. I don't know. Like like the ever underachiever. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's wrong with me, but it has to do with that.
Yeah. It all makes sense.
Yeah. But I'm trying. I'm getting, I'm strongly considering in October going through like phlebotomy courses and seeing if maybe the medical field is a place for me. That's like the least expensive kind of entry into it to kind of see if that field might be right. And from there, there's other nursing licenses and things like that.
That sounds great.
So I'm probably going to do that in October. I've got kind of a busy summer of things going on. Although I still dance, I'm also an excellent strip club DJ these days. I DJ a couple nights a week at a strip
transitioning.
Club. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, there's some hope for the old girl yet, I guess.
Well, it's a fascinating story.
It is. There's so much. I tried to get through it as quickly as possible. But God, it's such a, everyone I tell, especially if I have like the long conversations or I have friends that have heard parts of it over the years and they have maybe a much fuller view than what I've given you today. Every one of them just without fail is like, this is a fucking movie. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I kind of see it as like an 8-part Netflix kind of series sort of a thing. Cause it's even bigger than just like a one movie, you know? So I haven't mentioned, I do quite a bit of like theater acting and directing and some film stuff. Like it's all like very small, you know, around Portland. So I have started a Substack, which I'm using as kind of like a journal for this story. And from that Substack, I'm working with a couple of people that are more accomplished screenwriters than myself, to start to build a screenplay for this. Yeah. I think someone will be interested in this. We'll see.
Certainly interesting enough. Okay, thank you so much for sharing it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's a hell of a story.
It is.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
When I was designing the first Soft White Underbelly book, I realized that there were so many great portraits that weren't going to make it into that book. They just wouldn't fit. And once I saw how well that first book sold, I knew I'd have to design a second book. This second book is finally ready to ship. Like the first one, this book has a collection of some of the best portraits from Soft White Underbelly, accompanied by a quote from that person's interview. This book features another group of Rebecca portraits, as well as a collection of color images of the Whitaker family, and plenty of others. You can order yours for $125 or $150 for a signed copy at softwhiteunderbelly.org. Again, like the first book, once this book is sold out, I will not be printing more of them. The portraits are what Soft White Underbelly is all about, and these two books contain the best of all that work. Thank you for watching.